So the Derek Carr era with the Oakland/Las Vegas/Los Angeles
There you go.
and whatever other city they've called home is over. Derek Carr is gone. He was officially released yesterday, and now the big question becomes, the hell are the Raiders going to do a quarterback, and where the hell is Derek Carr going to end up playing quarterback? And as we talked about yesterday, the NFC South's got a couple of potential teams out there, one of which, I mean, the fact that he already spent time with New Orleans, that would kind of give them a little bit of a head start here on this whole thing, correct? He spent a couple of days in New Orleans touring the facility and all that. It feels like New Orleans would be the team you would think would have the lead here. Am I crazy or no?
No, I mean, and I think he should be looking at that roster wanting to play there. That's a talented roster. They've got a great defense. They've got playmakers on offense. When healthy, a solid offensive line. That would be a place that would be a tremendous destination. You're in a division that a team that was 8-9 last year won it, so it feels a bit wide open. I mean, you're going to be going at an Atlanta team that could sign a veteran, right? They could be in the mix for a Jimmy G or whoever else, maybe even Derek Carr for that matter. Or they could have Desmond Ridder as their starter coming back. It could potentially be another draft pick this year. So kind of question marks there. Carolina's probably drafting one if they're not in on Derek Carr. So you start kind of looking around that division. Tampa Bay, same thing. Maybe it's Jimmy G. Maybe it's not. If it's not Derek Carr, they might be drafting one. A very wide open division to go in, have success. That's a talented roster in New Orleans. I think a lot of those NFC South teams would make some sense for Derek Carr if he's looking at going in and trying to have some success right away. I mean, Tampa's another one, and already kind of threw in there Carolina.
Let's just start with, for me, the brilliance of how he handled the scenario. Instead of being in a situation where, potentially it's all based upon how the trade value fits and works out for the teams involved with the trade, he not only gets what he's owed from the scenario with the Las Vegas Raiders, but now he can approach any team. There's nobody that's off the table, and there's no situation that's off the table. His opportunities are basically limited to the amount of teams that are interested in him. I mean, he could actually approach teams that might not even have an interest in a quarterback and still ask them, is there any interest? There's no rules or regulations to what he had. Well, put it to you that he is a free agent. Put it to you that way, and I think that's pretty awesome for him to have a free opportunity for his team to negotiate a landing space for him. So regardless of where that is, there's not going to be, the price tag was too high based upon what they wanted back in compensation for Derek Carr. Derek Carr has the opportunity and the ability to be able to do a deal from scratch with the team that he goes to, and that's probably the best scenario that you could have playing out, being he's the only one that of note in terms of high-profile quarterbacks that's openly on the market right now. So he has his choice. He has his pick. It could be Atlanta. It could be the Saints. It could be Tampa Bay. Hell, it could be Carolina, right? It could be a couple other teams. It could be New York.
He's got a whole division that would be vying for his services.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then it feels like Jimmy Garoppolo's next in line. He would be the guy after Derek Carr they would look at.
But Jimmy Garoppolo isn't as attractive as a scenario as Derek Carr, in my opinion.
It depends on who you ask.
Well, I mean, it just depends on his health.
Okay.
If his health isn't in question, then there's the idea. I mean, you got to keep in mind he left the season again with an injury. And that's always, it's for what it's worth, whether it's warranted or not, that's just the book that's out on Jimmy Garoppolo, is that he gets hurt. Derek Carr doesn't have any of those kind of stigmas on him. There's no real stigmas on him other than he's almost like a Matthew Stafford. I almost would say it's comparable in some regards, because Matthew Stafford is one of those guys who said, well, was it the organization or was it him? And some would say it's probably a little bit of both, but I don't think, for what it's worth, Derek Carr is is probably the most attractive free agent, I'll say, or quarterback available, maybe outside of what you assume may happen with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, who else would you put above him? Outside, I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't put him above Derek Carr. Do you put? I put him. I could put him in the same class, but not above. I don't know. That's you got it. I don't, for me, I think that it's a safe pick, especially as a free agent. I think that it's a win situation for you as a team.
Yeah, look, I think just going back to the initial point, you probably won't see this done again. I can't imagine it will happen again. At least, putting in this particular date to have an option bonus as well as a portion of salary guaranteed, at that point, because it basically sped up when free agency starts, at least for one player. I don't imagine you'll see many franchises and clubs doing this moving forward. It seemed to be a precedent that I guess only Las Vegas was willing to make, but whatever the case is, it does give Derek Carr a nice jump on the rest of the free agents out there. So even if you view Jimmy Garoppolo and Derek Carr as even, Carr still has the opportunity to kind of basically figure this all out before the start of the new league year, which there's power in being able to have the freedom to do that. So that's the first thing. Derek Carr's health, his production is one thing. His health and the fact that he stayed relatively healthy as compared to Jimmy Garoppolo, I think is the other reason why most people would view Derek Carr as, a step above Jimmy Garoppolo. Because when Garoppolo has played, he's played well, and he's, for the most part, been really successful. Granted, playing on a great team in San Francisco, but, you can't take that away from Jimmy G. But at the same time, you feel like you need to have a viable backup because, he's a guy that's gotten banged up and has had a hard time staying healthy. And one of the most underrated attributes any player could have, but most importantly a quarterback, is durability. Ability is one thing, but durability, being able to be out there every single Sunday is something that's probably goes underrated because, people don't, take that and appreciate it. But at least you're giving your team a chance to go out and have a shot at winning with you back there. So I think he's going to be the top-rated free agent quarterback, although I'll be curious. I said this earlier this week. Like, if teams are interested in both, Carr, but also exploring, like, hey, what would it cost to get Aaron Rodgers? Okay. The difficulty there, though, is Rodgers plays for an NFC team, and so you might only get some AFC suitors, and which would make sense from the Packers' standpoint, and maybe even from Rodgers' standpoint, where in the Raiders you play with Devontae Adams, or with the Jets you've got a stacked roster, an OC that in Nathaniel Hackett, and they've already openly said they're willing to pay and do whatever. Well, if there's any team that's willing to pay Aaron Rodgers $60 million this year to be their quarterback, maybe it would be Woody Johnson and the Jets. Because he's got that under contract, so maybe they don't have to rework it. But I would say Derek Carr, at least among the free agent quarterbacks, is at the top of the list.
I can't believe that it ended up at this point with the Raiders. It was last March they traded for Devontae Adams. Last April he signed his new extension, and yet here he is, February, and he's looking around the NFC South for jobs. Just like that, less than a year. It went from, we're going to pair these guys up, they're close friends, they're college buddies, this is going to be the future. He finally has some help, finally has some weapons to work with, and less than a year later, he's gone, released, and now looking for work in the NFC or somewhere else. I just can't, I don't know how this ended up at this point. I don't get it. I don't understand what happened with the Raiders. Josh McDaniels was brought in, so there was supposed to be some stability there, and it was going to be, and it just... And which makes me wonder, was it always going to end up at this point? Were they never believers in Derek Carr? Because if that was the case, why did they give him the extension last year? I just wonder, did Josh McDaniels really buy into Derek Carr? Or was that all just fluff to try and, see how he would perform this year? And this was always the plan, they were going to move off him.
Looked like a scapegoat situation to me.
I just can't, especially all the crap that he took or had to deal with over the course of the whole John Gruden, debacle.
I don't get it.
That. Well,
and before.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's the tough part. Is I would hope people can understand the fact that, he's only trying to do his best, and then he gets that crap thrown on his plate, and he handles it with grace and handled it extremely well, and yet on the way out, there's really no thank you for anything. And look, I realize people only really will care if they win Super Bowls, But the reality is that team at no point in time during his career was ever built to help him win a Super Bowl. Defensively, they've been awful. Offensively, they haven't provided him with what he needs. So the truth is, even though he hasn't played always his best football, and I think he's accountable for that sometimes, he
was at the Pro Bowl.
Well,
That's true. You didn't make a Pro Bowl.
Skills challenge. Yeah. He kind of was.
I'm just saying, when he said that I'd still be in Las Vegas if I was hotter. Yeah. So,
yeah. No. But I guess the whole point is that it came down to this. But, look, you got a new head coach, new general manager, and they want to go in a different direction. I'm kind of more curious to see who they get. I guess as we've talked about the Rodgers trade there, it makes sense because he's got a familiar face in Adams. But that offense, it's not that Aaron Rodgers can't handle it. He's a really smart guy. But it's just all the verbiage and all that stuff's different. I remember being in Kansas City with Matt Castle and Brian Daboll as our OC. And even just from the time that I'd been with Brian Daboll like 3 years prior, he had changed a lot of his terminology. Like some stuff was the same, some stuff wasn't. It was probably like a third of what I had just three years prior with him. And some of the hard part was Matt had been in New England with Brian. And so some of the New England terms he had changed. And I'll never forget during the course of a game, like there was a couple things that I think Matt had kind of mixed up out there in the field. And, coming to the sidelines and talking about it. Like, it can be one of the most frustrating things because in the heat of the moment, you're always going to resort to your greatest form of training. And so, obviously, Matt had spent so much time with New England that, he had that ingrained in his mind. And for this, like, to have to learn a new offense, like, there's little things like that that become difficult. Like, is Rodgers going to want to do that going to the Las Vegas Raiders? I mean, I don't know. It's always a bigger hurdle than people realize.
I just wonder how much runway Josh McDaniels has now. Like you probably can scapegoat zero. You say zero, Berto. I listen.
Berto's disgusted. Absolutely disgusted with his Raiders.
Your scapegoat was Carr this year. Your scapegoat is Carr.
Who's going to be next year?
Carr's gone. Who's your scapegoat next year?
And by the way, Mark Davis, he may or may not have shaved his head. So there's that. That's gone.
No more Bucky Larson?
No, he's gone.
Oh, no.
Yeah, let me pull it up for you
The
here.
great bolo cut is gone.
That's speculation. Yeah, look at this.
Brady, David Carr was saying that Carr wasn't allowed to change plays the line of scrimmage. Does McDaniels usually do that with veteran quarterbacks? Or
there's some OCs who will be restrictive like that. Like I remember being with Brian that year, and we had a look at one of our running plays. And I literally – looked back over at him because obviously I can't talk at that point in the line of scrimmage, saying this isn't going to work. Like this guy's a free runner off the edge. We have no mechanism to help protect him from running down the running back from the backside. And so ran the play, handed it off. Exact thing happened. I talked about it that week in meetings. And so I went over the sidelines and we kind of got into it a little bit because I just said, what do you want us to do? So those are called carry runs. Call it and run it. And the problem with that is some OCs, they want to have complete control, and that's how they want to operate things. And they think that just because it's a bad look, it doesn't mean you can't block it up or things won't work out in your favor after the snap of the football. Because there is some luck to it, right? Like there's been some really bad play calls that have worked out, some really good ones that should have worked out that didn't. But there are times when you're going to have play callers who don't want you to change it. They don't care, if it's usually in the run game. Pass game's a little different because you can tweak the protections, routes, things like that. But in the run game, you'll get some stuff where that OC is, especially if he's got an ego, he wants you to call and run it.
Yeah, it's sorry, Berto.
That's why I think Aaron Rodgers is not going to play. McDaniel's not going to want Aaron Rodgers with the Raiders.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man, that's tough. McDaniels has had a lot of success as a play caller, and when you bring in a guy like that who wants to be out there and have his own ability to call whatever he wants, it's something different. I remember when the Broncos were recruiting Peyton Manning to go to Denver and John Fox was the head coach, he basically said to Mike McCoy and Adam Gase and those guys, hey, if Peyton comes in, it's his offense. He's going to run what he's going to run. We're all going to learn that and not try to make him learn what we've been doing. And that made it a lot easier for Peyton. And I think obviously it got going. 2012 was a good season. 13 was record breaking, and they ended up winning a Super Bowl later on. But it was one of those deals where you see how some head coaches and some play callers are, humble enough to kind of understand that. And Mike McCoy played quarterback. So he completely understood Peyton Manning's perspective in wanting to come over and do that. Adam Gase had been around a lot of quarterbacks, a lot of great offensive minds like Mike Martz. He understood it too. I think that made it a lot easier for them.